In a 1966 spy thriller, an agent in a tuxedo guns down an enemy, and 10 seconds later he's having sex with the man's wife right on top of a nuclear strike map. This wasn't an exception, it was the industry standard. They didn't just copy James Bond, they turned the Cold War into a sleazy fantasy where bullets were cheap and morality was free. Why did European studios decide that espionage was the perfect wrapper for everything forbidden in polite society? Today, we're cracking open the Eurospy archive, a world where secret agents looked more like psychopaths, and the very concept of the good guy vanished under layers of cheap makeup and plastic gadgets. At number 10, we have a film that turned Cold War paranoia into literal body horror. Spy in Your Eye isn't just another Bond clone. It is an ambitious, albeit utterly bizarre, attempt by Antonio Margheriti to blend the spy thriller with sci-fi. The premise is genius in its cruelty. The protagonist, an American agent, is kidnapped and forcibly implanted with a microscopic camera in his eye. Now every move he makes, every conversation he has, and every woman he sleeps with is broadcast directly to KGB headquarters. Why is this film in our archive? Because it takes the concept of the all-seeing eye to its absolute limit. Margheriti doesn't use this device to explore the genuine horrors of surveillance. He uses it to justify voyeurism. The camera constantly cuts to the spy's eye view, turning the viewer into a participant in this global invasion of privacy. We are forced to look at the world through the eyes of an agent who is himself the object of observation. Think about the hotel scene. The hero is in an intimate moment, and that eye camera constantly zooms in on details that should remain private. This isn't eroticism, it's an intrusion. The film is a manifesto of how 1960s cinema began to exploit the fear of technological progress, packaging it in a bright yet rotten adventure genre wrapper. Number 9. Operation Goldman, 1966. Director Antonio Margheriti. At number 9, we have another creation from Antonio Margheriti, Operation Goldman. If the previous film was about technology, this one is about pure, concentrated chaos. Here, espionage is merely an excuse to showcase that European cinema was willing to do absolutely anything for box office returns. The plot revolves around a villain named Goldman who plans to take over the world using an army of mutants and a secret underwater base. Sounds familiar? Of course, but in Margheriti's hands, it turns into an acid trip where logic is sacrificed for visual shock. What makes Operation Goldman essential is its absolute disregard for realism. There is no room here for Bond's British sophistication. Everything is rougher, faster, and infinitely grittier. The fight scenes are brawls where characters find themselves in situations bordering on the absurd. The film is saturated with the aesthetic of beach spy-fi, perpetual sunlight, women in provocative bikinis, and sets that look like they might collapse if you breathed on them. The most provocative part is how it treats the villain archetype. Goldman is a grotesque character embodying all Western fears of uncontrollable power. The film exploits the essence of the genre. The audience came for the high life with a dash of danger, but got a perverted spectacle where espionage was just a backdrop for an endless carnival of violence and half-naked bodies. It's a story about how to make the audience feel uncomfortable without them ever looking away from the screen. Coming in at number 8 is a monumental collaboration between Germany and Italy that defined the tough guy aesthetic of the era. Kommissar X, Jagd Unbekannt, also known as Kiss Kiss Kill. While dozens of other Eurospy films were desperately trying to emulate the polished, tuxedo-wearing suave of 007, this series, featuring the iconic Kommissar X, decided to throw the gentlemanly conduct out the window entirely. This is rough-and-tumble espionage at its most unrefined. It's gritty, it's masculine, and it's deeply rooted in the pulp fiction detective novels that were rotting the brains of teenagers across Europe. Unlike the calculated, gadget-heavy approach of British spy films, Kommissar X relies on a raw, street-level brutality that feels uncomfortably grounded. What makes this film a standout for our archive is the sheer physicality of its violence. There is no subtle maneuvering here. There's only the brutal, bone-jarring punch and the sudden, careless gunfight. But the real exploitation element here is how the film frames its female characters. They are no longer partners or even love interests in the traditional romantic sense. They are obstacles or rewards, often objectified within the frame with a camera that feels uncomfortably possessive and predatory. The directors use the exotic locations, ranging from neon-lit underground bars to dark, rainy docks, as a playground for a raw, aggressive kind of power fantasy. The audience in 1966 didn't come to see high-stakes international diplomacy or complex geopolitical schemes. They came to see Kommissar X settle scores with his bare fists. It's a textbook example of the hyper-masculine exploitation trope, where the plot exists only to justify a series of aggressive, dehumanizing encounters. There's a hollow, cynical core to this film. It treats the Cold War as a playground for sadists and opportunistic brawlers. By stripping away the glamour of the spy genre, the filmmakers accidentally revealed the ugly, opportunistic greed of the industry itself. It's not just a spy movie, it's a portrait of an industry that realized early on that if you want to sell tickets, you don't need a clever script. You just need a hero who hits harder and a world that feels a little bit more dangerous and a little bit more lecherous than it actually is. Number 7. OSS 117, Mission for a Killer, 1965. At number 7, we dive deep into the French contribution to this madness. OSS 117, Mission for a Killer. Now, you might think the French would bring some sort of highbrow sophistication to the table, and to a degree they do, but it's a veneer that cracks under the slightest pressure. Beneath the polished aesthetics of André Hunebelle's direction lies a cold, clinical exploitation of the global traveler trope that was so immensely popular in the mid-60s. OSS 117 wasn't just another copycat agent. He was the archetype of the cynical agent, who views the entire world as a massive, disposable chessboard, where human beings are nothing more than pawns to be sacrificed. This film makes our list because it perfectly weaponizes the concept of cultural exoticism for the sake of the grindhouse. The film bounces restlessly from European capitals to the Near East, but it has absolutely zero genuine interest in the cultures it portrays. Instead, it treats every foreign land as a temporary stage for sexual escapades and stylized, impersonal assassination. The film's hook, the thing that kept the audiences glued to their seats, was the complete lack of moral consequence for the protagonist. He kills, he seduces, he betrays, all with the same detached, icy smile. He's a man without a country, and more importantly, without a conscience. Mission for a Killer is essential for our archive because it showcases the darker, more nihilistic side of the jet-set lifestyle. It sold the intoxicating idea that if you had a secret identity and a gun, you were essentially a god, free from the laws of man or morality. It exploited the post-war obsession with glamour and luxury, turning every scene into a showcase of expensive clothes, beautiful cars, and vulnerable women who exist only to fall for the agent's hollow charm. It is a deeply nihilistic film. While it looks like a standard adventure on the surface, it's actually a hollow shell of human desire, proving that the Eurospy genre didn't care about the real politics of the Cold War. It cared only about the fantasy of the untouchable man. It's an exercise in moral emptiness, wrapped in a tuxedo, and sold to an audience that was more than happy to pretend that the world was just as shallow, exciting, and morally bankrupt as the screen in front of them. Number 6. Lucky el Intrépido, 1967. Director Jesus Franco. At number 6, we enter the surreal, neon-drenched domain of the master of sleaze himself, Jesus Franco. Lucky el Intrépido, also known as Lucky the Inscrutable, is the exact moment where the Eurospy genre finally sheds all pretense of being a serious, grounded thriller and fully embraces the absurd. If you followed our journey through this archive, you know that Franco wasn't interested in making a good movie by conventional standards. He was an auteur obsessed with building an atmosphere of fever dream eroticism and jagged, disjointed style. In this film, he takes the classic spy archetype, the cool, collected agent, and drags him into a hallucinatory, kaleidoscopic nightmare where nothing makes sense, and quite frankly, that's the entire point. Why does this film belong in our archive of transgressive cinema? Because Franco uses the shell of a spy thriller as a Trojan horse for his own personal, darker obsessions. The plot, which involves a mysterious killer known as the Bird, is entirely secondary to the sheer hypnotic style of the production. Franco treats the camera lens like a voyeuristic eye, obsessively focusing on the physical, the strange, and the decadent. While other directors were desperately trying to film high-octane chase sequences to compete with Hollywood, Franco was busy composing shots that felt more like fashion spreads for an underground, illicit magazine. The provocation here is the eroticization of danger. In nearly every scene, you feel the director's burning desire to push the boundaries of what a mainstream 1960s audience would accept in a spy movie. The film is filled with bizarre lighting choices, irrational character decisions, and a constant underlying current of sexual tension that feels completely out of place in a typical action film. It proves that by the late 60s, the Eurospy genre had become a playground where directors didn't care about the complex geopolitics of the Cold War, they cared about the aesthetic of the forbidden. Lucky El Intrépido is a haunting reminder that in the hands of an exploitation auteur, the hero is just a puppet, and the entire movie is just a canvas for the director's darkest, most stylish, and most perverse impulses. Number 5. Secret Agent Super Dragon, 1966. Director Guido Zerli. At number 5, we hit the absolute peak of the so bad it's good phenomenon. Secret Agent Super Dragon. Starring Ray Danton, this film is the gold standard for how to produce a movie on a shoestring budget while desperately trying to mimic a $1 million production. The title alone tells you everything you need to know about the total cynicism of the industry at the time. It's a transparent, desperate attempt to latch on to the dragon imagery that was popular in global cinema, combined with the super agent trope that every studio in Europe was chasing. This film is essential for our archive because it represents the trash heap of the genre. It is completely devoid of artistic merit, yet it is profoundly significant because it shows us exactly what the studios thought their audience wanted: cheap thrills, recycled sets, and a complete disregard for narrative coherence. Super Dragon is a film where the gadgets, which are supposed to be the spectacular highlight of the spy genre, are blatantly, laughably pathetic. Seeing the hero try to use a futuristic-looking plastic toy as a lethal high-tech weapon isn't just funny, it's an indictment of the entire exploitation machine. The provocation here is the blatant, shameless insult to the audience's intelligence. It's a film that assumes you'll be so distracted by the vibrant colors, the deafening music, and the constant frantic movement that you won't notice the movie is falling apart at the seams. And for the most part, it actually worked. It was a massive success in grindhouses across the world because it provided a spy movie experience without requiring the audience to engage with anything substantive. It exploited the viewer's desperate desire for escapism by feeding them nothing but pure, refined cinematic junk food. Secret Agent Super Dragon is the ultimate proof that in the world of 60s exploitation, the brand was everything, the quality was irrelevant, and the audience was more than happy to pay good money for the lie. It was an industry built on the premise that if you put the word agent on a poster, the public wouldn't care what they were actually watching. 4. The Corrupt Ones. Coming in at number 4 is The Corrupt Ones, also known as Die Holen van Macau. If many films in this genre were frantic, low-budget riots, this film brings a touch of international class and high-stakes intrigue that makes it stand out. Starring Robert Stack and the iconic Elke Sommer, the film moves the action to the shadowy, neon-drenched streets of Macau. It's not just another spy mission. It's a globe-trotting heist story where everyone is working an angle, and loyalty is the most expensive commodity in the city. What makes The Corrupt Ones a crucial entry for our list is its obsession with the morally compromised anti-hero. Unlike the black and white agents of other franchises, the characters here are professional mercenaries and opportunists, caught in a web of greed. The film captures the transition of the mid-60s. We're moving away from the simplistic us versus them spy tropes and into a grittier, more cynical world where personal profit outweighs national security. The provocation here is the atmosphere itself. James Hill directs with a sharp, noir-inspired focus on the claustrophobia of the environment. Macau isn't shown as a tourist paradise. It's shown as a dangerous, unpredictable labyrinth of back-alley deals and sudden betrayals. The film works because it doesn't try to be a mindless action flick. It plays like a sophisticated crime drama that happens to have the pacing of a thriller. It's a masterclass in tension, proving that you don't need excessive, explicit content to keep an audience on the edge of their seats. You just need a tight, unpredictable script, a heavy sense of impending doom, and the cast that knows exactly how to sell the idea that in this world, nobody is truly innocent. It is a sleek, polished, and intensely calculated look at the greed that defined the international underground of the era. Number 3. Agent 3S3, Passport to Hell, 1965, directed by the prolific master of Italian genre cinema, Sergio Martino. If our previous entries were cynical, this film is purely, unadulteratedly aggressive. Martino takes the standard Eurospy formula and strips away the last lingering remnants of gentlemanly behavior. This isn't a story about saving the world, outsmarting a mastermind, or protecting international peace. This is a story about primal survival in a world that is inherently, irredeemably violent. Why does this belong so high on our list? Because of the sheer, visceral physicality of the film. It is raw, it is confrontational, and it is obsessed with the mechanics of pain. The fight scenes aren't choreographed with the grace of a ballroom dance. They are brutal, ugly, and designed to leave a mark. But the true exploitation here lies in how the film treats the environment. Every setting, whether it's a sterile laboratory or a dingy, smoke-filled warehouse, is shot to feel claustrophobic, dirty, and deeply threatening. It captures the underlying tension of the mid-60s perfectly, transforming the vague, abstract dread of the Cold War into something you can physically feel. Passport to Hell is a textbook example of how the spy label was used to bypass censorship boards in Europe. Because it was framed as a spy thriller, the film could get away with levels of brutality and sadism that would have been cut from any standard drama. It's a cynical exploitation of the genre's tropes. The secret agent is just a thug with a mission, and the mission is just a flimsy excuse to break bones and crush spirits. It's a bleak, gritty, and deeply uncomfortable watch that pulls back the curtain on the glamour of the era to reveal the dirt, the blood, and the moral rot underneath. It's a film that asks no questions, offers no answers, and leaves the viewer with only one takeaway. In this world, if you aren't the one doing the hurting, you're the one being broken. Number 2. Danger Diabolik, 1968. Director Mario Bava. At number 2, we have the undisputed king of visual insanity, Mario Bava's Danger Diabolik. If most Eurospy films were cheap, derivative carbon copies of Bond, Diabolik is the psychedelic fever dream evolution of the entire genre. Bava, a legendary cinematographer turned director, treats this movie not as a standard spy flick, but as a living, breathing comic book. Everything here, from the hidden metallic lair to the shimmering futuristic costumes and the bizarrely efficient gadgets, is designed to overwhelm the senses. Bava uses the camera to transform a heist story into a high art exercise in pure, unadulterated aesthetic dominance. Why is this film near the top of our list? Because Diabolik is the ultimate anti-hero manifesto. Unlike other agents who hide behind the thin, virtuous veil of serving their country or protecting democracy, Diabolik is a pure, unadulterated criminal who does whatever he wants, whenever he wants, simply because he has the power to do so. The film is a masterclass in style over substance, but Bava's style is so hypnotic, so saturated with color and innovative framing that you literally cannot look away. The provocation here lies in the fact that the film forces you to root for the villain. There is no moral compass here, just pure, narcissistic, and deeply satisfying desire. Bava turns the spy genre into a gallery of visual crimes, where the act of stealing a gold bar is filmed with the same erotic obsession one would reserve for a love scene. It is the purest distillation of the Eurospy spirit, a world where traditional laws don't exist, and the only thing that matters is how good you look while you're burning everything down. And finally, at number 1, the absolute apex of the dirty Eurospy archive, The Spy Who Loved Flowers. Directed by the relentless Umberto Lenzi, this is the film that completely shattered the mold of what a spy movie was allowed to be. It is the ultimate jagged synthesis of violence, exploitation, and bizarre nihilistic plot twists. While other directors were trying to make sense of the geopolitical climate, Lenzi went straight for the throat. The film is a relentless, punishing parade of everything the genre stood for: casual cruelty, objectification as a fine art form, and a total scorched earth approach to storytelling that leaves the audience breathless and bewildered. What makes this our number 1 pick is its sheer brazen refusal to respect the audience or the rules of traditional cinema. It doesn't want you to think. It wants you to be rattled, disturbed, and addicted. The film is structured like a series of increasingly extreme provocations, each scene more aggressive, more visually stunning, and more morally bankrupt than the last. It represents the final stage of the Eurospy craze, where the genre stopped pretending to be about secret agents at all and became a pure, distilled showcase for the director's most twisted, inventive, creative impulses. The Spy Who Loved Flowers is the definitive piece of exploitation history. It turned the Cold War into a grotesque caricature, stripped it of all political meaning, and left only the raw, pulsating drive of human greed and desire. It is a film that proves these movies were never really about secret agents. They were about the absolute freedom to be as loud, as violent, and as dirty as possible under the mask of a globally recognized franchise. It is the ultimate archive of the forbidden, and the reason why, 60 years later, we are still obsessed with the beautiful, chaotic wreckage of the Eurospy era. It is the end of the road, and it is utterly unforgettable. So, we've journeyed from cheap imitations to psychedelic madness, from plastic gadgets to pure unfiltered voyeurism. Eurospy wasn't just a genre. It was a rotting yet incredibly stylish monument to the Cold War, where the line between hero and criminal was erased forever. These films were the forbidden fruit of their time, and today they serve as a mirror, showing us exactly what the industry was willing to do just to get a reaction out of us. But be honest, do you really believe this genre died? Or have modern blockbusters simply learned how to hide their dirty underside a little better than the directors of the 60s? Let me know in the comments. Which of these films are you actually brave enough to watch tonight? And what's the one reason you'd cancel the Eurospy genre right now? Hit that subscribe button. Here, we dig into the archives that everyone else prefers to forget. See you in the next investigation.